Cell phones, could you silence them or turn them off, please? It is my pleasure to introduce Pulitzer Prize finalist, cartoonist, independent war journalist, and polemicist, Ted Rall, the author of 16 books, including the Anti-American Manifesto and To Afghanistan and Back, a graphic travelogue. His new book revisits what he sees as the rapid rise and dizzying fall of Barack Obama as president, and the emergence of the Tea Party and Occupy movements, and draws the conclusion, we the people weren't lied to. We lied to ourselves, both about Obama and the two-party system. Please join me in welcoming Ted Rall.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it, and thanks to Elliot Bay Book Company for having me. They've always been the store has been a very faithful supporter of my work for many years, and I really appreciate it. It's really, there are so few truly great independent bookstores left in the United States, and I urge people here, even if they're not going to buy my book here tonight, which they should, to buy books here, like paper books, and pay top dollar, and don't go to Amazon, look at books here and then go to Amazon or scan the code with your phone or anything lame like that, because really, truly, I mean, we're going to turn around and wonder why there are no bookstores left in the same way that there are no record stores left. And, the fact that there are no record stores left sucks, really. I know Seattle has a few, but across the country, there are almost none. I live in New York City, and there are no record stores, which is insane. Thanks again for having me here. I'd like to echo Aaron Magruder, who's the brilliant African-American cartoonist who created the strip and TV show The Boondocks. Whenever he does a public appearance, he walks up to the mic and he just says, "Questions?" Because the Q&A is the best part. So I'm going to not do that because this book is new, and I'm sure nobody here has had a chance to read it. It's not actually out yet until June 5th. So these are like secret bootleg copies that you can sell on eBay for a profit. So you should totally buy 15 each and just make some money. They won't be worth anything after June 8th. But so I'll explain a little bit about the book, and then I hope you'll have lots of questions, and don't be afraid at all to be challenging or disagree with me or anything like that, because I like a good discussion, and I don't take it personally. So with that, I'm going to walk back to January 20th, 2009, when Obama walked into the Oval Office for the first time, and as president. Here was a man who was facing an economic crisis that was, you would say, unparalleled since the Great Depression, but in some ways was worse than the Great Depression. Between 2007 and the time that Obama took office, depending on how you count, between 25 and 28 million jobs had ceased to exist. And that's not counting the fact that wages and underemployment, wages had been shrinking and underemployment had been increasing steadily since the end of the Vietnam War. But the crisis caused by the subprime mortgage meltdown created a job apocalypse. You had 25 to 28 million people out of work. That's just tremendous. I mean, it's a de facto unemployment of 22% in the American workplace that took place in just 2 years. Now, this is not without precedent, right? I mean, FDR faced a similar dilemma. Now, yesterday, I don't know if you heard about the new job statistics, but over the last few months, the American economy has generated an average of 69,000 jobs a month. Now, in order to break even, just to keep even with population growth, you need to the American economy has to create 120,000 jobs a month. So 69,000 is actually, we're losing jobs every month. That we create 100,000 or fewer jobs, we're losing jobs. And we're not doing anything about the 25 to 28 million people who lost their jobs back in 2007 to 2009. So here's where we're at. You're the President of the United States. You are facing a structural economic problem that is that's just incredible. I mean, and if things continue at this present rate, we will all be unemployed. I mean, that's the inevitability. It's just statistics. So the American economy is continuing to shed jobs, but people don't realize it because of the way that they cook the books on the unemployment numbers. The unemployment rate just ticked a little bit up from 8.1 to 8.2% this past month. But the reality is that the actual unemployment rate is somewhere between 20 and 25%. If they calculated the rate the way they did before Ronald Reagan rejiggered the way that they calculated it, there's a website called Shadow Government Statistics, highly recommended. It has actual unemployment, actual inflation, the way it used to be calculated. We are at the same levels as we were at the peak of the Great Depression. And you have a media that's reporting that we have we're in a recovery, or as the New York Times reported, recovery lags. Well, you have to have a recovery in the first place in order for it to lag, and we don't. So, people, the reason why am I telling you all these statistics, which are kind of dry and boring, and you're expecting humor out of a cartoonist? The reason I'm telling you is because imagine yourself as Ronald Reagan in 2009. You have one hell of a problem to deal with. And how do you deal with it? Well, he didn't. Okay, he didn't. When he came into office, he had the Democrats controlled both houses of Congress, and there was tremendous political capital. Obama could have pushed through pretty much anything. We were scared. We were losing 600,000 jobs a month in January of 2009. The economy was in free fall. At that time, there were polls taken that showed that over half of the American public favored socialism or communism over capitalism as the economic system that this country should have. That's unbelievable for this country to say that. That's how scared we were. The media was completely in Obama's pocket. He could have done anything. He never proposed a single jobs program. There was a short-term, very small, watered-down stimulus package that went into the pockets of the states. And all they did was use the money to do stuff that they would have done anyway, road maintenance, that kind of thing. But no new bridges have come out of this, no new subway projects, no new trains, nothing. The net effect of it has been zero. And you're going to hear Obama, over the Obama campaign over the next few months, talk about how he created 4 million jobs. But remember what I told you about how you have to create 120,000 jobs a month just to break even. So 120,000 jobs a month is 1.4 million jobs a year. 3 years, that's 4.2 million jobs. The point is that we are not, sorry, that's not true. That's right, 4.2 million jobs. So he has not created any jobs. It's a net loss. 4 million is a net loss. And that doesn't even address the 25 million that we talked about earlier. So this fall, when Obama loses to Mitt Romney, who's a complete tool, people are going to ask, how the hell could this have happened? Well, this is how the hell it could have happened. The President of the United States came in facing the number one problem that people cared about and didn't do anything about it and didn't even address the issue. Now, that, I think, is at the core of why a lot of people on the left turned away from Barack Obama in the fall of 2011 and started to look outside of the old paradigm of post-1960s liberalism, which has said what lefties should do is take over the Democratic Party from the inside and look outside to the Occupy Wall Street movement. And in 2009, earlier, the Tea Party, in its sort of pre-Koch brothers, pre-corporatized state, we saw people on the right, mostly libertarian types, constitutional purists, look outside of the Republican Party for solutions. And now what you have is the vital center is gone. We are in a time of crisis. In times of crisis, there's no moderation. We have radical problems. Radical problems call for radical solutions. And so, yes, there are still people who are centrists, obviously, but there are a lot fewer of them. And a lot of those people other ones have moved to the far left and to the far right. And we're spiraling out of control. And really nobody knows where this is going. Now, back in 2009, when it became pretty clear that the Obama administration was not going to be very responsive to this crisis, I began writing my last book, which was called The Anti-American Manifesto, which basically said, look, the system is broken. It was irredeemable from the beginning, and now it's unreformable, which is to say it is not capable even of saving itself in the way that it did in the 1930s. It knows what it has to do to prevent its leaders from eventually being strung up from lampposts, but it can't do it because the structure has just gotten to the point where corporate power is so entrenched that the liberal component of the ruling classes cannot prevail in the conflict between the liberal ruling classes and the conservative ruling classes. And so in that book, I call for the overthrow of the United States government. Now, this book is not that book. This book is, obviously I come from the same place. I still think that's the solution. But what I'm trying to get people to see is that we're kind of in the same place that the Soviet Union was in 1989 or 1990. Barack Obama is Mikhail Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev is the best, kindest, most intelligent, most well-intentioned, most liberal leader that the Soviet system was possibly capable, not of creating, but of allowing to come to power. Certainly there were far better Russians, but he was the best that system was going to let be in charge. And nevertheless, it collapsed due to lack of internal support. People just stopped believing in it. And the reason that is because he was the best that the system could possibly provide. People saw that it wasn't a matter of personality. When you had a monster like Stalin, or even a bureaucrat who was out of touch like Brezhnev and Apparatchik, you could think, well, if we had a better premier, the system might be better. But once you have a good premier, and you see that the system still sucks, then you see that the system, not the man, is the problem. Here, I think we're at the beginning of that discussion. We're able to see that Barack Obama is about, as Eric Alterman said, the most liberal, well-intentioned, intelligent leader that will ever be allowed to be president of the United States. And to which I say, that's exactly the problem. He exposes the nature of the system. Obama, I think, is actually unwilling to make change. But whether he's unwilling or unable kind of doesn't really matter, right, in the end. And the case that I make in this book is that it's time for us to stop thinking of elections or to stop thinking about politics as Romney versus Obama, Democrats versus Republicans. It's really about this fake political system and the real political system. Politics is something that the American people have been outsourcing. Outsourcing has completely fucked up the United States. We've outsourced our jobs, and now every 4 years or every 2 years or every 1 year, depending on how often you vote, we outsource our politics. What we do is every 4 years, we elect a president, and then we forget about it. We go about our business, we barely pay attention, and then we come back and we start thinking about it 4 years later, and we're like, wow, what did that guy do? And we have Ronald Reagan's famous question, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? We all ask ourselves, am I better off than I was 4 years ago? Most of the time we say no, and so we vote against the bastard, and we vote someone else in. But the point is, that's not the way politics are. Politics are something that are supposed to take place every single day of the year, all the time. Politics is something that takes place at a book signing in Seattle. It takes place in a coffee shop. It takes place over Thanksgiving dinner with your family. It takes place all the time, where you talk to your fellow citizens about the way we should live and what we should do. And we have not been doing that. And what was exciting and what is exciting about the Occupy movement, and to a lesser extent the Tea Party movement, is that is a process of people who realize that they have to talk to each other and try to figure out how to live their lives. It's not about outsourcing anymore. I spent 2 weeks camping out at Occupy DC when it first started. And thing that was amazing about that was, we had separate subcommittees to discuss, like, economics and finance, war and militarism. And it's like, we have ordinary people from every walk of life, from all sorts of different political stripes. We had like Ron Paul libertarians. We had traditional old-fashioned like 1960s liberals. We had communists. We had left anarchists. We had conservative anarchists. All sorts of interesting subsections of resistance to the system. And these people, we all had to get together and treat each other as equals. We couldn't, we couldn't just sort of like, surf away, like look at their comment on Facebook and be like, and then just move away. We had to actually engage and actually try to convince and actually be convincible. I think that's in a way the most important thing, is to be more open to listening to other people than to be just trying to be effective at communicating your own thoughts. And the point is, it was frustrating, it was annoying, it was exhausting, and it was incredibly important, and it's something that we had better get used to. Because in the rest of the world, even in dictatorships, people do this. I've seen people in Afghanistan do this. I've seen people in Uzbekistan, which is a military dictatorship, do this. And they are, we need to catch up with the rest of the world. We talk a good game about democracy. We don't do democracy. Democracy is about engagement. It's about, in French, there's a term about the engagé, the citizen who's engaged. That's what this is about. And it's not, when you go vote this fall, that's not engagement. Not voting is not engagement either. It doesn't really make any difference. What I'm really saying is, vote, don't vote, vote for Obama, vote for Romney, vote for a third party, do whatever you want. But don't think it makes a difference. What you need to do is think about what does make a difference, and that's the politics that takes place on the street. The politics that took place, for example, in 1999 in this very city during the WTO process. That's real politics actually occurring. And so I thought I'd show some comics. It's just because, it's more fun than me just ranting on about Occupy Wall Street. And this is, and the book has both prose and cartoons about Obama in it. And I'm just going to sort of show some stuff that I've been working on lately that's kind of in the spirit of the book. None of these cartoons are in the book, so you still have to buy the book. Oh yeah, this is, I should have put this up earlier. Alan Keyes was saying that I should be sent to Guantanamo. Okay then. I like the idea that people think Obama is a radical socialist. I'm like, I wish he were. This was after the latest atrocity in Afghanistan. The U.S. is honorable. The U.S. military is full of nice, smart professionals who love the Afghan people. Don't blame us for the actions of one bad apple. Pointing to Obama. Okay, I was actually very proud of this, so if you guys don't laugh or like this cartoon, I'm going to be sad. Shortly after a new president takes office, he can't do anything. He has to save his political capital. Just into the first term. He can't do anything. The other party controls Congress. During the re-election campaign, he can't do anything. He needs to get re-elected. Then he'll do something. At the beginning of the second term, he can't do anything. A lame duck has no political capital. At the end of the second term, he can't do anything. He has to get his party's nominee elected to succeed him. Shortly after the new president takes office, he can't do anything. He has to save his political capital. Thank you for laughing. Romney needs to move. I don't know if this is like basically the tenor of all commentary on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. Romney needs to move to the right to shore up the GOP base. Obama needs to move to the right to get swing voters. Then there's people watching. What about left-wing voters? They need to move to the right to catch up with Obama. Deep beneath the Earth's crust lies the Super Romney PAC attack bunker. People are pissed off at Obama. Great. About what? He didn't help the jobless or the foreclosure victims. He didn't punish the banksters. Healthcare, no public option. But we agree with all that. So this is the solution. Mitt 2012, like Obama, but white. I mean, at this point, it really is, I mean, he's a miserable president, but I think the opposition to him in the mainstream system is pretty much over race. Here's Obama in the Situation Room in the White House. Romney was a bully in high school. Campaign gold. Let's discuss it after the sanctions briefings on Iran, Burma, North Korea, Cuba, and Zimbabwe. And there's guys launching drone assassinations. Who's the bully? The not-so-distant future. Very impressive resume, Mr. Obama, but no one's hiring, especially not former laid-off middle managers in their 50s. Maybe if the government passes some stimulus. U.S. troops will stay in Afghanistan until at least 2024. Someday all this will be yours. My son loved the SpongeBob reference, but that was for him. At the this was after a guy got, I don't know if you've heard the story, a guy was in Afghanistan and nobody really knows what killed him, but he was a soldier in Afghanistan and he died while Skyping with his wife. So I did this cartoon because I'm a tasteless bastard. Okay, check it out. This guy died in Afghanistan while Skyping with his wife. I live tweeted my suicide. No way was I gonna let Zuckerberg monetize my demise. I saw your death on Pinterest right before I succumbed to cancer. It was live streamed on YouTube. Really good video, which you posted to LinkedIn, where no one will ever see it. LinkedIn fascinates me. I mean, because it's a website dedicated to the prospect that there are people looking to hire people, which I think is funny, because Americans, we rule the world. I hope the president I didn't vote for arms the rebels we know nothing about against the regime we also know nothing about in Syria, which I can't find on a map until I forget about it. There was a movie that came out a few years ago by a couple of Dutch brothers called This Ain't No Heartland. And they were Dutch guys. They interviewed people at a mall in Des Moines and asked them on a map to point to Iran. And almost everyone pointed to Australia. Question. I lost my job. What is Obama doing about unemployment? Answer. Obama killed Osama bin Laden. Question. How does that help me find a job? Answer. Now you don't have to compete with Osama bin Laden for a job. Question. But he's only one guy. Answer. Obama is using drones to kill lots of other people, which means fewer applicants for that great job you want. Question. But that's in other countries. Answer. Funny you should mention that. This was at the Secret Service scandal with the prostitutes in Colombia. I mean, you know, cartoon gold, right? It's like, deadline, met early. Finally, Obama created 20 whole jobs, but they're in Colombia. I was very, you know, it's just fun to draw prostitutes, but anyway, or sort of old school prostitutes. Those Colombian women were amazing. They weren't like this at all, but whatever. Okay, who's there? It's God. Come to the light. It's time. Weird. I'm ready. I've lived a full life. I've seen and done and loved. I've tried to do good. You have been good, and now your heart is going to be implanted into Dick Cheney. Ooh. Be right there. Nice. In the future, Andy Warhol, of course, said in the future that everyone would be famous for 15 minutes. But Andy lived in a time of mass culture. Everyone watched the same 3 channels, watched the same Oscar-winning movies, and read the same books from the Book of the Month Club. So it's like there's a guy watching the Beatles, and he's like, commie, and that's a reactionary coot who nevertheless can ID the Beatles. Pop culture has fragmented. We read one of a million jobs, listen to obscure bands, and stream movies that are never released in theaters. Even big stars are unknown to most people. Yet right now there's a traffic jam at the Coliseum for this band called LMFAO. Everyone wears like bright primary colors to go and see them. I'm like, they're a big deal. I never heard of them. I had to like look them. I had to Google them on my phone today, and I was like, That's what I'm talking about. Like, these are big stars. I've never heard of them. I love music. It's bizarre. Okay, so.
We're just getting old, that's all.
Yeah, there's the old thing, for sure, 48. But, okay, now, in the future, everyone is famous to 15 people, of whom they are all in this room for me. Okay, my sister is my favorite ebook novellicist. Who? What? Not actually in the same place, just a hologram. All right. All right. So, just lest you think that I only hate Barack Obama, that's just not so true. I mean, my heart is so full of hatred, and for all politicians, that I don't leave Mitt at all unscathed. Okay, so I just wanted to, because even though the book is about Obama, because he is the president, so it's fair. So, new for 2008, the appliance you never knew you needed or wanted, the MittBot 2012.2. It relates to your concerns. Don't you just hate it when your portfolio turns out to be insufficiently diversified? It solves your problems. Looks like someone needs a brief clasping of arms about his or her thorax. It learns from its mistakes. Note to self, stop referring to Terran babies as work drones of my future corporate dystopia. It even emotes like a human. Error code -44, add green screen here. He's just so, I've never seen a politician as uncomfortable in his or her own skin, ever. I mean, it's just bizarre. In an America with two parties, the KKK and the Nazis. You have to vote. The Nazis will make things even worse. No, the Klanocrats take us liberals for granted. Both parties are evil. I refuse to support either one. There's a big difference. The KKK hasn't killed nearly as many people as the Nazi publicans. Also, the Klan is slightly less evil on gays and abortion rights. Let them be slightly less evil without my support. The Imperial Wizard promises a liberal second term. Local clavern, here I come. The two-party trap. I was very happy about this cartoon. Here's like Obama trying to plan with his strategists about what the new campaign slogan's going to be. Could be worse. Prevented a depression. 4 more years. Like, yeah, we're going to need more coffee. Actually, they went with forward. Seriously, that's what they have. Forward. Recovery. Natural causes. It only counts as suicide if your unemployment benefits haven't run out yet. 50 million babies have been aborted since 1973. Lucky stiffs would all be unemployed today. I did a similar cartoon about 9/11, about how, those 3,000 people, how many of them would have lost their jobs and been crumpled up like an old sheet of tissue paper if they had kept working in that office for the next 10 years? How many? I mean, hundreds for sure. And so in a way, they get their names on a statue. Their survivors get death benefits. It's kind of worked out okay for them. Anyway, see, I'm be popular for this. Okay, so the birth con. I'm obsessed with the birther thing because the logic of it escapes me. So, unleashed upon an unsuspecting world, Barack Hussein Obama, 1961. A boy is born, not in Hawaii, in Kenya. A shadowy group of conspirators hatches a masterful plot. This boy will be president of the United States, our puppet. Countless lies must be told. Bribes are paid. Documents are forged. No one must ever know. Those who suspect the truth are silenced. Shut your yap, Trump, or these hair plug pics go online. Finally, in 2009, the imposter rises to ultimate power, which he uses to continue everything pretty much the way it's always been. Lamest, sinister scheme ever. Ha! Do nothing corporate centrism will destroy the world. Now, this is a brilliant cartoon, and you should totally be into this, but all right. The killings of an unarmed teenager in Florida, Afghanistan, is prompting angry demands for the arrest of the vigilante who shot him. Not only did the cops not arrest the killer, they're on his side. A self-appointed neighborhood watchman noticed Trayvon Martin because of his clothes, appearance, and location, then targeted him. Looks like a terrorist. Take him out. Claiming the right to stand his ground against a perceived theoretical threat, the attacker acted without fear of arrest. Once again, an innocent young man falls victim to racist profilers who kill with impunity. Seriously, the drone operators go by such markers as what color turban an Afghan is wearing. And if you're wearing a black long-tailed turban, which some Talibs wear, they will say you're a Taliban terrorist, even though actually lots of tribesmen wear those turbans who are not Talibs. Passive resistance comics, 1943, Sobibor death camp. Good news, I stole a cache of grenades and guns from the guard's armory. This is a peaceful movement, Pechersky. If we use violence, we'll become just like them. But they're heavily armed. No, first we chant, hey, hey, ho, ho, the systemic mechanized mass murder of European Jewry has got to go. Now we escalate. Petitions, Facebook event pages, lobby the Reichstag, blog. Look, we have grenades. Let's blast these Nazi bastards too. No, be the change you wish to see. Occupy our doomed lice-infested barracks. So those are some of the cartoons I've done in the last couple of months, and I am now ready for your questions, comments, insults, complaints. Yes, sir.
Yeah, but what if, Romney gets in there and, then social issues especially, maybe there's all these differences and...
Yeah, I don't think there's going to ever be a really big difference. I mean, is there no difference at all? Of course there's a difference. The thing is, in the short run, it's the logical decision is to vote, if you're a liberal, is to vote for the Democrat over the Republican. But the problem is that, life is a long-term decision that's composed of a series of short-term decisions that have all added up to bring us to where we are today. Now, if like in 1972, people had, for example, instead of caring about McGovern versus Nixon, had stayed in the streets, we might be in a very different place today. But instead, we trusted the two-party system all these years. And look at us. I mean, the ideology of the country through Democratic and Republican presidents alike has shifted to the right. It's always one step forward, two steps back. And you end up with, Barack Obama would not have been considered, left. He would have been considered too far to the right for the Republican Party in the 1950s. Eisenhower never said that it was okay to torture and assassinate American citizens for no reason whatsoever. Obama does. Conversely, Barry Goldwater could never be in the Democratic Party today because he would be too far to the left. He said he was in favor of gay marriage in the 60s. Obama wasn't when he was elected. So you're just talking about the problem is that I think that if you keep going with the short-term decisions, which I have, okay, but you get to a crisis point, and a crisis is a time when you face a dramatic choice, usually between two pretty unpalatable options, and I think that's what we're facing right now. And the two kind of untasty options that we're dealing with are economic and social and political collapse, kind of like the Soviet Union in the early 90s. And then, you saw what happened in the 90s. Russians starved to death, gangsters took over the country. It's still a disaster over there. They were better off under the Soviet system. And then, do you go with revolution, which is everything can burn. You can have many people are going to die. It's going to be, good people are going to die. And it's just unpleasant no matter how you look at it. But that's because we have made all these short-term decisions that didn't work out for us. But history kind of also shows that you're inevitably going to get to a point like that, right? So there is, can the system be reformed? Possibly. I don't think so. But it's a judgment call, right? I could be wrong, but I think that just from what I've seen, I haven't seen much indication that these guys know how to save themselves or their system. So, do you want to? And there's another bigger question, I think, sort of emotionally. Do you want to live in fear? Really? I mean, don't you sort of just get tired of it? It's like, what if Mitt Romney becomes president? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure his Supreme Court will be worse. I'm sure. Like, if he gets to appoint a Supreme Court justice, women will lose the federal right to an abortion. I'm sure of that. And I'm sure a lot of other stuff is going to go wrong too. But you know what? It's like, I can't vote affirmatively for Barack Obama. I mean, this guy, he kept Guantanamo open. I mean, as long as there's one guy in Guantanamo, and some of these people came in, they were 12 years old when they were thrown into Guantanamo. These were children. They were sold by warlords. I mean, one 12-year-old boy who's now 22 or 23 years old, who's been living in Guantanamo most of his life, it's like, that kid deserves justice. That kid deserves to be out, deserves Obama to be on his hands and knees, apologizing and kissing his feet, and on behalf of all of us. And I can't possibly get behind, if he wants to keep that kid in prison another day, he can do that without my support. He can do that, but I'm not going to have any part of it. As it is, I pay my taxes, and I shouldn't, but like, that's just because I don't want to go to jail. But it's fear, right? Fear is a terrible thing. I mean, it's a judgment call, but by all means, vote for Obama, but at the same time, so I'm not saying don't vote for Obama, but it doesn't sound like you're too enthused. Doesn't sound like you're going to go like bring doors or make calls. So spend that time that you might have spent working for Obama doing something more productive. And there's a lot more stuff that we can do. And I think that's. But it's for everybody to choose. I just want people to choose with their eyes open, and not to just sort of reflexively just go through the motions. It's election time. I must go down to the place where there's the old ladies who watch the precinct and vote for one or the other. 1, 2, yeah.
Obama came in, all the jobs that were lost, and everything else that he inherited.
Well, I should answer a question that you didn't ask, which is, what should he have done? I mean, FDR employed 9 million people directly under the WPA, CCC, and other 1930s Depression-era New Deal programs. At this point, 9 million people then is about 22 million people now, and that would put a huge dent in unemployment. He should have at least proposed that. I would have liked to see, I would never fault a guy for trying and losing. If he went to Congress, he couldn't get it done, they said no. Look, he fought for it. He campaigned all over the country. He was on TV all the time, calling press conferences, arguing for it, running ads, and he couldn't do it. Okay, the dude tried, but he didn't try, And why didn't he try? I mean, why didn't he try? Well, I mean, I think that, we have to go, and in the book I go back to the primaries, and I try to remind people, in the Democratic primaries, John Edwards was the liberal, right? And then the media completely destroyed him. They didn't give him any oxygen. They didn't cover him. Fairness and Accuracy of Reporting did a survey where they analyzed how many minutes each candidate got on network news. They found that like Edwards had just been shut out. So he never got his message out. And but he was the liberal who talked about the two Americas. He had the Occupy Wall Street message before 3 years earlier. And then he had the 1%, 99% argument. But he was pushed out. Then who are we left with? Well, I mean, Hillary Clinton was the moderate, right? Barack Obama was the conservative of the three. People forget that. So, and if you look at his voting record in the Senate, I mean, there's not much of a record, right? He didn't do much. But, there's no evidence that this was ever any kind of like wild-eyed, Alinsky-loving socialist, ever. I mean, there's no evidence for that at all. This was a guy who, when he was in law school, he was not a radical leftist constitutional scholar at all. He was a very middle-of-the-road kind of guy. Ideologically, in the Senate, he went along, he voted for the wars over and over and over again. He voted 6 times for funding the war against Iraq and Afghanistan. Never voted against it, had many opportunities, didn't. Others did, he didn't. And so I think that this was never a man who viewed government or big government as a solution to problems. I mean, he was a member of the Democratic Leadership Council, which was the Clinton era, kind of triangulation, Dick Morris, conservative Democrat thing that started in the early 90s. And so ideologically, this was a conservative Democrat, right, always. And he was, so aside from that, it's possible that a man with more principle might have come in and said, things have changed. The economy has crashed, and now I have a responsibility. History has put me in a position where I now have to do something completely different. Screw my donors, I'm doing it. But he didn't do that. And I think that it's because, one, he never had the inclination, and two, the system would have never allowed a guy who had the inclination to be elected. He wasn't that guy. I mean, people blame his advisors, like Timothy Geithner. Who appointed them? He did. I've read stories about German soldiers serving on the Eastern Front during World War II who talked about, if the Fuhrer saw how we don't have any warm clothes, he would be pissed. It's all the underlings around him, Himmler and Goebbels, those corrupt bastards. They're the ones who are giving him bad advice. Really? Who appointed them? He's an absolute dictator, right? So, Obama has the advice that he wants. He never, economically, think about who he brought on, a bunch of guys from Goldman Sachs. He never called Paul Krugman, who was the guy who was on board who knew what was going on years earlier and warned about it.
Paul Krugman said in an interview that he did not want to work for Obama.
Well, I think that that's right. But the thing is, okay, I have two things to say about that. First of all, I don't care. I don't know if anyone in this room got a call from the President of the United States, even if it was Bush. Really? He's like, I need your help. I need your advice. Can you really turn down the President of the United States and call yourself any kind of American? I don't think so. And also, a lot of presidents call people as private citizens. They don't necessarily, Kissinger gets calls all the time. And he doesn't have an official capacity. It's like, he can call Krugman and just talk to him, right? But he doesn't. So, it's a choice. I'm sorry, sir, you're in the back. You were waiting.
Why are just the percentage of your cartoons that are about Obama, whereas what I wish you would really focus on is the military. I'm really on their case because they always say they're defending us. But none of the wars since World War II have been self-defense. We killed millions of people in Korea.
Wait, you must not read me regularly, because if you did, no cartoonist is more anti-militaristic than I am. No way. No way. Help me out here, Steve. Brilliant cartoonist here, Steve Notley, who does Bob the Angry Flower. I'm hard on the military. I get death threats because of the anti-military cartoons that I do, and I also write a lot of brutal columns taking down militarism. I hate the cult of militarism, and I'm not a pacifist at all. But but I do think if we ever had to defend ourselves, I would be the first to go fight. But as you point out, the United States has not had pretty much to defend itself almost ever. And we're an aggressive nation. We attack other countries that have in an unprovoked way. It's what we do. We're an expansive, brutal empire. We've taken over where the Brits left off, except with less panache and understanding of local culture and uglier uniforms. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
In the U.S. Constitution, Article 1 dealing with the legislature, Section 2, Clause 3, it says for U.S. representatives, we're supposed to have one representative for every 30,000 people. Voice of the people rather than what we have now. But no one seems to know the Constitution.
But that's an if. You had a lot of ifs there.
But Congress just passed a law, just blew it away.
Well, but that's
14th Amendment.
I want to give other people a chance to ask questions too. But I think that with this is sort of the reformist versus revolutionary discussion, really. It goes to, this is why I think the system is unreformable. Whether it's an idea like you talk about, or like when people say, oh, if we just got money out of politics, if. Yeah, well, the point is that we're not going to get money out of politics under this system. We're not going to get a constitutional amendment like you describe, or any kind of sense of the original intent of the founders under this system. We're not going to get. I mean, they ignore their own constitution, right? I mean, like Congress has the right to declare war. That's been usurped from since 1801, and it's just gotten worse and worse. And now basically the president is a dictator, and so you've got so the thing is that going to happen? No, it's not going to happen. And that's why I say the system's not reformable. There's no way to imagine that happening. We can say if all day long. If a UFO landed on the building right now, I could not have to have paid for parking to come over here today. But it's not going to happen. And there's not also there's not going to be a constitutional amendment. There's been no serious revision of the Constitution in any substantive way in over 50 years. And and why is that? I mean, think about it. We used to add new states and new stars to the flag, and we used to amend the Constitution, and we used to do a lot of new things, right? We don't anymore. We're stagnant. The paint is peeling off the walls. We're on the way out. And that's why, you can say, well, let's try to fix this thing, but I say this dog is 16 years old. It's going to die. It's time to put it down. Yeah.
You're the president on September 12, 2001. How do you respond to the act the day before?
It's I would say that it's a police investigation, first and foremost. I mean, what happened on 9/11 is a crime. It is a matter for the FBI to examine, to determine who was involved, and to then find out where those people are, and if those people are in foreign countries, to work with the governments there to extradite them so that they can either be tried in the United States under a full trial, or they can be sent to a neutral party like The Hague. But it is not a military issue, because we were not attacked by a state actor. We were attacked by terrorists who are kind of remotely affiliated with a state. I mean, Al-Qaeda was not a subsidiary of the Afghan government or the Taliban. And they had a much closer relationship, for that matter, with Pakistan. And I would have said that if a military response was required, which I don't think it was, and I don't think it was a good idea. I think it obviously wasn't a good idea, and I was against it at the time, and I said so loudly. But but I think that if you were going to go that route, Pakistan would have been the country to invade. I mean, they had nuclear weapons. They represented an existential threat to important neighbors like India and Afghanistan, actually. And the country had been taken over by a brutal military dictator, Pervez Musharraf, who jailed his democratically elected predecessor and tortured him nearly to death. This is morally, ethically, strategically, Pakistan would have been the right country to invade. And would have been better real estate, too. I mean, in terms of if you're going to occupy someplace, Pakistan's certainly more useful to occupy than Afghanistan. Yeah.
It's a general question, and I apologize. I was hoping you could touch base on what you feel the current state of affairs of the Occupy movement is, whether or not it's had any successes.
Well, the Occupy movement has had a success. The success is that for the first time since the Kent State shootings, the American people went back into the streets to do politics. That's the success. So whether it's successor actions like what happened in Chicago recently, or the events that are going to obviously transpire and have taken place, like in Oakland, and are going to happen at Charlotte at the political convention. These are successes in that it's about discussion. But Occupy obviously has run into a major crisis. I mean, they've been pushed out of all their encampments. The encampment idea was flawed from the beginning. The idea that they weren't going to resist, that they were going to not resist, they were just going to walk away nonviolently, was probably a huge tactical error. Oakland sort of shows the promise of what's possible when there's resistance. And I think that there's the democracy is hard thing comes into play there. I mean, if anyone who's been to an occupied General Assembly knows that can be very frustrating to try to achieve consensus on even the most minor issues. I'm active in my local Occupy, which used to be called Occupy the Hamptons, and is now Occupy the East End. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a little action where we invaded our local Bank of America and read a people's foreclosure to them, and they locked us in. The cops came. It was very exciting, and and people were. And I saw it was shocking in East Hampton, New York, which has the highest per capita income in the United States and the highest property values in the United States. People are driving by in Lamborghinis and honking their horns and screaming, "Fuck the banks." So there's a lot of anger in some surprising places. But the Occupy movement could go away. It could be replaced by something better. I don't think it's possible to put the genie back in the bottle anymore. I think once people have had a taste of what political power feels like, they're not going to just put up with it. Not to mention conditions are going to continue to deteriorate, and the issues are still there, right? I mean, the government corruption. I mean, just last week, the AP reported that the median salary of a CEO last year was $9.6 million. I'm like, really? Like last year, in the middle of a depression, these fuckers are paying themselves $9.6 million each? They should all be in prison for life. And their banks should have all been nationalized. I mean, I had a speeding ticket that ended up costing me $5,000. A speeding ticket. These guys stole the entire country. I mean, it's, seriously, it's madness. And I know that lots of people feel the same way. So it's not going to go away, I don't think. Or you go follow up, yeah.
You brought up Oakland as a kind of isolated example of something within the Occupy movement.
Well, because in Oakland, people probably are aware, there's been some violent resistance to, much more violent police action. The police were brutal, and they attacked people. They nearly killed an Iraq War veteran who was there to protest peacefully. And, in some cases, protesters threw things back and raised hell and refused to go out quietly. And as a result, they shut down the Port of Oakland. They made a big splash. They put the local government in crisis, and they got bigger numbers. I mean, so you can sort of, in revolutionary struggle, nonviolence, especially at the beginning, is the dominant form of resistance, because if you don't, the state has all the power and they're going to crush you. But I don't believe in a strictly 100% nonviolent approach to resistance, because for the simple fact that never in the history of humankind has radical change, I mean radical revolutionary change, ever been carried out fully nonviolently. And I don't think it's ever going to start. It's just the nature of power that these people hold on to their prerogatives and their money until they're forced to have it taken away. Yeah.
This weekend was the Democratic Party state convention. I think it's still going on. So here's some delegates. My question is this. No doubt these probably about 1,000 delegates in there, or 600 or 1,000. They voted to endorse Obama, endorse Maria Campbell, our senators and stuff. And no doubt they believe that their votes or that their participation in the state Democratic Party is determining who's eventually elected president.
Well, I mean, the smoke-filled rooms are a thing of the past, right? I mean, but we also, but I mean, I used to be very active in Democratic Party politics all the way through the Dukakis campaign, and I've been a delegate to the Democratic National Convention when I was young, and I've seen it work from the inside. I think that the fix is pretty much in years in advance. It was determined that, I mean, look at this. Look at the Democratic primaries. I mean, it's hilarious that you have a party that calls itself the Democratic Party that didn't have primaries, that no one opposed the sitting president. No one. No, there's like not one person who even thinks, boy, I could make a name for myself and set myself up for a run in 4 or 8 years. They've all been cowed by the Democratic Party machine, by the leadership who's told them, you want a future in this party, you don't oppose Obama in the primaries. I mean, really, Dennis Kucinich? You don't really think it would be fun to run for office just to bring up the issues and have your point of view discussed? really? Like Al Franken? You don't think it would be like interesting to have like a funny liberal take on, presented there? Like, no. And so, yeah, I think pretty much they're deluded. I mean, look, anybody who thinks that the Democratic Party, or for that matter, the Republican Party, is responsive to we the people, I think is crazy. But but I can't judge because I've been crazy for years. I was, it's like a lot of people got it a lot earlier than I did. I used to hear like, makes no difference, they're all the same, they're all corrupt, and I thought, that's not true. No, it is true. Yeah.
But after 8 years of George Bush Jr., and with the Supreme Court now having made its ruling, and what the demise of America in terms of what money is doing right now, with all those things involved, do you think that you could at least give some consideration to the Democrat leadership in the sense that if there's any viable alternative to what the Republicans would have if they were to have their way, is to give the front and center rein to Obama, because a lot of other people like Kucinich just might not make it at all, and then as a result Democrats would not win, and then we would go to a worse situation than we had with George Bush Jr.
Well, I think that the Democratic Party, I would rather see a person of principle elevated and lose than to see a bunch of moderate, quote unquote, moderate sellouts elevated and win. Look at the Republican Party. They voted their principles in 1964. They nominated Barry Goldwater. It was a devastating defeat, and it completely defined the future of American conservatism. I mean, he became from that loss. The takeaway wasn't, oh my God, he was too conservative. They didn't start watering down their candidates. They continued in the conservative path. I mean, Ronald Reagan certainly was to the right of Barry Goldwater, and George W. Bush is to the right of Ronald Reagan. But the takeaway for them was like, it's having strong principles will shore up your base. I mean, I know myself as a former Democrat that like if we had, if it was possible to have a John Edwards become the nominee, as an example, in today's Democratic Party, I might not be standing up here pitching this book. This would be I'd have a completely different outlook. I mean, the fact is that like, liberals' relationship with the Democratic Party is dysfunctional. I mean, when do liberals ever get anything back? I mean, what's the big takeaway? What, we got gay marriage? Like, we got that ourselves. The Democratic Party didn't give us that. That was something that we got in court, and that the public opinion just changed. Like, what did we get? Like meanwhile, the economy is completely being rejiggered in the favor of the 1%. The wars continue. Now it's like, oh, we have to go help Syria. Like, really? Like, when does it ever fucking stop with you people? When? Ever? Like, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. The economy is finished. And it's the Democratic Party. I mean, these they're just as bad. They're worse.
So
Yeah.
concerned. But at the same time, I just think that in terms of all that I went through as a citizen in the last 8 years prior to Obama, that I feel like I've had a little bit of oxygen.
My turn to ask a question. In what way? Really, I mean, what substantive thing is better, except for the fact that the president speaks English now? No, I mean, he's much more presentable. When I see, it used to be very bad under Bush. You'd see him next to the British Prime Minister, and you'd be like, "Oh God, this is like I'm hurting here," as an American. But aside from the fact that he's presentable and charming and attractive, really, what substantively has changed?
You don't think, as a statesman, that his relationship with the foreign world and foreign policy with various nations, that you don't think that we have regained as Americans a sense of community in the...
I don't, actually. I think there was a sense, around the Nobel Prize period when people thought that would be the case, and Obama gave his speech in Cairo. But, he's been a right-wing hawk on foreign policy ever since. I mean, let's look at I think the world's opinion about the drone attacks in Yemen and Pakistan and Afghanistan, not just in those countries. Europeans, they think we're scum. because we tolerate that. And they're right. We are scum. And in terms of the the relationship with the rest of the world, I mean, America is always, we're still bullying. I mean, we've given a blank check to Israel. Where they can do anything they want, build more settlements. It's totally in violation of UN resolutions, and we just turn a blind eye. And that policy is exactly the same. That's very unpopular around the world. We still haven't like loosened our immigration policy. So we're still, anyone who comes to visit the United States, they're getting like at JFK or LAX, they get retina scanned and fingerprinted and all that. They don't. When I went to Iran in 2010, they didn't even put my baggage through the X-ray machine, and they said, "We would not do that, sir." I'm like, "Why?" And they're like, "You are our honored guest. You are a foreigner. It would be rude." I mean, and speaking of Iran, I mean, Obama's saber rattling with Iran it's unconscionable. It's dangerous. It's immoral. And he's wrong on the facts. There's literally no evidence whatsoever that Iran is doing anything wrong. And so it's just, I mean, no, I think our relationship with the world is about where it was under George W. Bush, really. I mean, I really do. Yeah.
To his point, all I can think of was Sarah Palin.
She was a complete idiot. But the point, but that's, but see, this is the point. It's like it's a trap. Okay, my grandfather was in Buchenwald. Okay, and he told me this story about how one time they had the sadistic guard who they were all lived in. He and the other guys around him lived in terror of, and then they found out he was being transferred, and they were scared shitless, and they were like, "Oh my God, if we lose Rolf, like, who knows what kind of monster might come in here? And like, it might be even worse." And it was like, and then, he was laughing when he told the story, but it was real because, inmates, their survival hinges on like getting to know one particular type of sadist. And like, now there's a new one. Oh my God, like, what if we don't read this guy right? We're dead. And I really think it's like that. I mean, it's like, yeah, Sarah Palin been elected president. For sure. I mean, McCain, she would have killed McCain, and then like McCain, she'd be president. And then we'd be like, we'd have nuclear war probably. But she's
revolutionary. That would be good for you because perhaps things would get so bad that.
Well, but seriously, under a Republican, the left is around. But under any kind of right winger, the left is alive. They're out protesting. They do stuff. They push back. The left threw away their protest signs after 2009. They went away for 3 years. It was like, I remember getting calls after Obama was inaugurated, and they said, from newspapers, and they were like, it must be very tough for you political cartoonists. I was president of the Association of Editorial Cartoonists at the time, and so I always got these press queries. What are you cartoonists going to do now? I'm like, what do you mean, what are we going to do now? Like, well, now Barack Obama is president. Jesus is president. And I'm like, are you kidding? He's a politician. They're all lying sacks of shit. It's like, we just have to wait for the shit and the lies to come out. It's like, it won't take long, and it didn't. I mean, it's like, but they really thought that. Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, I mean, it's a missed opportunity that Sarah didn't become president. But but believe me, I've had no problem with Obama either because he's so smarmy, I mean, he's so smug and sly and like, I mean, this guy, how is he different from a Republican? He is a Republican. The guy's he golfs, okay? Democrats don't golf. Republicans golf. Like, not real Democrats, okay? Like, golfing is a right-wing thing. Hugo Chavez was right to turn all the golf courses in Venezuela into public parks and nationalize them. It's like the guy went golfing 75 times in the last. How many people here golf and have been able to go golfing 75 times in the last 3 years? Probably like no one in this room. It's like the guy's president of the United States. I mean, he thinks he has free time? Really? I mean, really? It's like, no, he's just. I think we have to understand there's a big difference between someone who's likable and someone who has policies that you can get behind. You don't support someone whose policies you're not behind. Maybe you don't have to be behind him 100%, but 70, But I can't be behind 70% of Obama's policies. I can't be behind 7% of Obama's policies. Yeah.
What about revolution? You're still in favor of revolution, aren't you?
It's an absolute necessity. Of course. I mean,
So how do we do that? What does that look like?
well, if there were a simple solution to how to create revolution, someone would have come up with it. No two revolutions have ever been created the same way. And they've all, what generally happens is that revolutions are not created, they're spontaneous outbursts. You have a lot of dry tinder, a lot of sparks flying around, and then something catches. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does, and then it just gets out of control, and a system that was that was at the edge just teeters and falls, and something new fills the vacuum. And I think that's what that's what's going to happen. It would be nice if we could do it in some kind of controlled way, so that we don't all end up like in burning cities. But that's how do you make revolution? I mean, you wait and see. We're not in a revolutionary crisis moment right now. What we are in is we are in a state of collapse that could lead to a revolutionary crisis moment. But if you went out right now and tried to form a mob and burn things down, the cops are just going to come and kill you. So it's like you're not going to get anywhere. This is not the time. But Lenin thought the revolutionary crisis moment had occurred in 1905. And for that, he warmed a prison cell. And and as he wrote, well, I was wrong. 1917, he was right. You just have to try, as Mao said, fail, fail, fail again better. Just keep trying. I mean, it's like, we are, I think the whole point is, the first step is to, and this is what the purpose of the manifesto was, is just to start thinking about it. Like for people's minds, to open up to the possibility of politics outside of D versus R. One more question, yes. Yes.
To follow up on that, I agree with you that the system's really been done for. And I recommend Dmitry Orlov.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
He's awesome.
I quote him in the manifesto.
So the question of what it takes to make revolution, let's turn that around and say, what's still holding the system together at this point? If you could name a couple of things you think are important, whether it's political, economic, environmental.
The question is what's holding the system together still. Well, inertia, first and foremost, is always what holds any system together. I mean, look, it's terrifying. Having been to failed states like Afghanistan, it's terrifying. I mean, it's like people need order. People like order. It's pretty tough to live in a place where, in Afghanistan, I've seen things like a 10-year-old boy walk out into the street with an AK-47 and shoot several people just for fun because he wanted to see it happen. And there's no one to even report it to because there's no police. And that's revolution, that's collapse, that's what we don't want. And I think people are terrified of that. And that's why for now it goes on. But besides that, obviously this is a rich, incredibly rich country. The richest country that's ever been created in the history of mankind. So there's enormous resources. There's an incredible security and military and the militarized police apparatus that holds it together. We're all living in fear. When you see those flashing red and blue lights in your rear view mirror, you're scared shitless, even if you think you were just speeding, because they could do anything to you. Fear is a huge thing that's keeping it going, and obviously it's like Rome at the end. There's a lot of wealth is pouring in from overseas. There's a lot of money here. What I think the ruling classes, as Marx anticipated, what the ruling classes failed to do is to understand that they can't just keep aggregating and monopolizing all the wealth and power into ever fewer and fewer hands and still have an economy. An economy is not aggregated wealth. An economy is the movement of wealth. When a human body, the difference between, like if I die right now, all the parts are still here, right? But the only difference between me dead and you alive is that your blood's still moving around inside you, right? And money is the lifeblood of the economy. You are, and it's not moving. It's not circulating. There's no credit. No one's buying anything. No one's lending anything. No one's investing. No one's giving people raises. That's the problem, and it's because this was something that was anticipated almost 200 years ago, but. I think it's doomed. It's just taking longer than one would hope, but that's, of course, inevitable. And it's very powerful. It's a tough nut to crack. I mean, this is it's the other thing about this form of capitalism is that it's so self-sustaining. It's its own logic. It's not, it's not the Bilderbergs. It's not some conspiracy of a cabal of people meeting at the WTO and deciding, or the the G7 trying to figure out how to rule the world. This is about people. This is really about something that goes on without the personalities, with or without Obama or Angela Merkel. It doesn't matter. It just keeps going because it has its own internal logic. The head of a corporation has a fiduciary and legal responsibility to maximize shareholder returns on a short-term basis. So even if he or she wants to not lay off those 30,000 workers and just to get the short-term jump in the stock price, she or he still has to do it. It has its own logic. Even a good person has to act evil under the system. That's why it's the system that's the problem. It's not the personalities. People are people. People are good, people are bad. But systems make people act good or bad, and that's where we're at. So I want to thank everyone for coming tonight.